Blog Talk Radio.
Over bridge of sight, to rest my eyes in shades of green, under dreaming spires, to Ichiku Park, that's where I've been. What did you do there? I got high. What did you feel there? Well, I cried. But why the tears there? Tell you why. It's all too beautiful. It's all too beautiful. It's all too beautiful. It's all too beautiful. I feel inclined to blow my mind, get off, beat the ducks with a bun. They all come out to groove about, be nice and have fun in the sun.
Let me tell you guys something. If there is not a better song to celebrate summertime, that is it. That's one of my favorite all-time summertime songs. Welcome to GIM Radio. It is June 6, 2014. Barnacle Bob and I are back. Scorpio may join us if he can find the time. And we also have Michael Vanderpool, who's going to drop in on us tonight, too, and bring us up to date on what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. But it's summertime. Bob has been out on vacation. I've been out selling my past curbside. Been going through all my stuff, have it all in a big old barn, and spending the last couple of weeks going through it, sorting through my past and what I want to keep. I put in one corner what I want to throw away. I put in the trash can, which is actually a lot more than I thought. And the things that I really don't just care about, I put out to the curbside and put a sign on it and let people come and buy it. So that's what I've been spending my summer vacation on so far. Bob, how about you, man? What's up?
Hey, Rich, it's funny you mentioned that. As we had a storage shed down in Florida, and I from where we made this transition from Florida to Tennessee, and there was a lot of I don't know what you would call it, wealth or whatever that was packed up in that shed.
Yep.
And in the end, most of it I basically just gave away.
Exactly, man.
Mainly because it's just crap. And, the reality is that I looked at it and I said, wow, this crap represented my labor. And that's why I had such a hard time getting rid of it. Because I went, well, okay, it took me, 30 hours to purchase this, or it took me 3 hours to purchase this. And the thing is, if I would have sold it, I would have gotten 3 to 5 or 8% of what I had originally paid for it. And
that's right. That's right.
The thing is, there's something very wrong in our pricing system that we can work this many hours and it becomes worthless. And we have storage sheds for this crap because we won't get rid of it. Because our house can't fit all the crap, Right, and it's just a bunch of cheap, worthless crap in the end.
It is. It
so
truly is. Bob.
It really is just best to, when you're done with it, take your loss and get over it. But what I really realized was that I should have never bought it in the first place.
Exactly, and what's kind of unique about my deal is that for the last 2 years I've had this kind of a garage type of a shop. It's like an old barn but it was converted to HVAC shop at one time, and I think there was an auto shop in it at one time, and it's a two floor deal. I got this basement part, and I got the upstairs, and it's actually pretty big, but it sits right on a very busy road. The road here in town is called Bethesda Church Road, and there's at least 1,000 cars that go up and down that road every day, and I'm right there on it. So this stuff has a place to go, so that these people that drive up and down the road every day, going to work and whatever, gets to see what I have out there, and I haven't had too much problem moving things. But one thing that always comes up 100 times is that they'll stop and they'll look at what I have out front with prices on it and stuff, but they always look inside the barn and they see just this mountain of stuff, and they say, that looks kind of like my garage, or that kind of looks like my basement. I mean, everybody has just a ton of just worthless stuff. And it's just piled up. It's not being used. It's the remnants of this 2006 2007 spending spree. Okay, that everybody was on. I mean, everybody bought everything.
We're talking about the bubble.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the bubble that really began somewhere around the Bill Clinton administration. And I was I was a product of that, and that it would be infinitely ongoing, et cetera, and I had numerous people tell me that. And I remember being a car dealer. I remember when the bubble began popping. Everything was looking really good, and all of a sudden, within 2 or 3 weeks, many, I can't say most, but many of our major lenders that we had would fax us a thing that said, well, any deals that were approved we're going to honor. And we're not taking any more applications. And I knew then and there it was over.
Right.
That the whole thing was a fantasy, and of course it's falling away just as it has. And we're going to operate at a lower level of economic consumption. And if you think about what I just said, most people don't realize when you get one of these faxes and they say, well, we're no longer going to lend any longer. No fault of your own. There's no longer going to be any more lending, and most of these places went bankrupt and just plain disappeared, along with banks, etc. And this was prior to the 2007-2008 collapse. But going back to what you were saying there, yes, the bubble economics of, I'm going to put in here, I remember being a computer buff and a gamer where every 2 or 3, 4 weeks there was a new video card coming out that promised faster performance, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And those days are over. You don't see that anymore.
Mm-mm. But what I found out, once when you have basically your whole life's worth, I mean, what you accumulated over the years, and what you have, and actually some of the things that I've actually drug in probably about 3 moves from, and twice was from this coast to the West Coast, and then from the West Coast back here. And, things that I've drug around with me basically, all my adult life and things. It's really weird because there's so few things that I really care about anymore. I mean, care enough to put in my I'm going to keep pile. And, a lot of it's going in the trash, and an awful lot's going curbside. And you're absolutely right. You're going to take a loss on this stuff. I mean, that we bought for $300 or whatever. I kick it curbside and I put like $30 on it because I really don't care. I just want the stuff gone. I really just it's almost as if I just want my past gone, and I just want like a new start. And there's very few things that I'm going to carry on with, man. Very, very few things.
Deepong, our former friend G-Pond, or Kevin, produced put a very good post up, and I don't think most people recognize what it was saying. And he was talking about what Mises said would happen, and that there would be a real discrepancy against pricing versus value, in the future. And what happens inevitably is that something gets advertised and it creates the animal spirits of desire. We purchase it, we overpay for it.
Absolutely.
And so we pay $300 for it, and then a year down the line we find out that we're going to get $30 for this. We're going to take what would you call that? A 270% loss?
Yeah, but that's actually in my observations. I watched the people very closely that come through and look at stuff, and I watch them as they drive up and down the road. What they're looking at in my array of stuff out front there, and the thing is that there's many things where I would price it at. I mean, and I'm not trying to make any cash off. I'm not trying to recoup anything, okay? Because I'm just trying to find out what the price break is, where somebody stops and actually buys it, actually puts enough value in it to stop and and say, okay, to me that dinette set's not worth $100 because I've driven by this road all week long and I haven't stopped. But when I dropped it down to $30, then at that point that was a price break. That and that is the true value of that. It's not what I bought it for, but it's what somebody's willing to pay for. I mean, that's the value of it, not what I think it is. I see Scorpio chimed in now on this one.
Did he?
Yeah.
How you doing, guys?
Fine, man. How about you?
What's going on?
So we're talking about getting rid of the past, and I guess what it actually boils down to is what somebody else is willing to pay for my past, and it's kind of a awakening experience there too, but.
Oh, it absolutely is, because nobody's willing to pay squat for your past. No,
I can't.
Seriously, they aren't.
I can't even give away my past, buddy.
Right, exactly right. That's for anybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're going through and what you're thinking. But more important, you're getting past that materialistic level in life and moving on to something else.
Right. And I'm finding
that's
that
more important, and money can't buy that.
The things that I'm really holding on to are really a lot of my kids' stuff. I mean, stuff, drawings that they did when they were kids, and just things that and it things that I put a lot of value on that I wouldn't sell for $1,000 or $2,000.
That's okay. Nobody would buy them anyway.
I know. Well, but the material things, I'm really kind of loose of it all, man. I'm about done. There's more important things in life than accumulating stuff.
Well, it depends. Like, if you're on where Hoarder's at, he needs certain things to function.
Oh, yeah.
Where Andy's at, he needs certain things to function, or where BB's at. It just depends on where you're at and what you're doing as to what you really need. And right now, you're in almost mobile mode.
Yeah.
So basically, that kind of future doesn't exist right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of in this mode because there is a move, and
correct.
And,
yeah.
And
you just prep it for it.
And I'm being very careful what I'm going to carry with me into the future. And actually, what's kind of odd is that a lot of this prep stuff, I bought into that thing, hook, line, and sinker, and I'm not so sure that was a valid spending of resources, man. I mean, I would argue that
if you're in a stable situation, that prepping is not only the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do, simply because whatever natural calamities can occur, you can weather the storm. If you think you're going to beat back the government with your preps or survive a nuclear blast, you're being a fucking nut.
Yeah.
True. I mean, all these people building underground bunkers to protect themselves from what? You don't think these little bunker-busting bombs, like if they really wanted to waste one on you at $1 million a copy, they could do it? Or they'll just find your air supply and just smoke your butt out. I mean, it's not a hard process to get you out of that bunker. I mean, it really that's a very valid point, and contrary to what many people think, that once you set roots down in a geographical spot, if it's been tried with castles. It's been tried with fortresses. I mean, if somebody really wants that spot, depending upon how strong the force is, I'm sorry, but there's no way for you. There's no way for you to ever truly defend a piece of land. You just can't. I mean, if it all depends on how bad somebody wants to take it from you. And then the Indians tried, and the white people kept coming and coming and coming, so they had everything slaughtered to the West Coast. So
my whole my whole idea of preps has changed.
Correct. To a more reasonable look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to discount the whole prep thing, and I think that it's important. But instead of getting heavy and trying to last years and stuff, I think you got to be light and be able to move. But that's just me.
Well, let me say this. Let's be honest about it. You don't own it if you can't defend it. And the simple fact is, the only reason that we pay property taxes is that evidently there's enough people out there that say, well, we don't own it, and we're not going to defend it from the powers that be. Because the reality is, if one county, one city, whatever, turned around and said, you know what, we're done with paying property taxes. We want to own our land. And they're willing to stand up for it and to say that, then there would be a major change. But so far, the programming is so complete that we've got to do this for our children, who they're going to put through this programming sequence called public education, et cetera, to fund it. But the reality is, you don't own it if you can't defend it. And any of us who try to defend it, we're called terrorists, or we're called this, or we're called that. And so, we're going along with this social, cultural dynamic that is taking place. As far as prepping, myself, I don't figure to prep more than 3 to 6 months. Whatever is going to take place, I don't need years and years worth of food, this and that. If it's not rectified by then there's then I'll have to change my scheme. But even at that, if there's this great, tremendous, tumultuous uproar, I'm going to have a hard time defending my 3 months worth of food supply.
Absolutely.
Or energy or whatever, much less 6 months. So, I'm not a big fan of all this prepping and all that. I think you should have enough to get you through any kind of a upheaval, social upheaval, political upheaval that should occur. That's the way I look at it.
Right. But, so, anyway, that's what I've been doing with myself. I've been just kicking my past curbside, man.
Bob,
getting ready for better days.
Hey, Bob, I would appreciate it if you go down to the county office tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And get the stamp on your forehead.
That says I am robot.
That you are what they say you are.
Well, I am who I say I am, not who they say I am.
No.
But until everybody else, until everybody else wakes up and says, you know what, this is a bunch of crap. I'm forced into this, this paradigm. And so there's no other way around it. I've got to play the game. No, I don't like it. The thing is, everybody else turns around and says, well, I don't like it either. But, they're not willing to turn around and go, well, you know what? Let's get a group together Let's get one county together that turns around. One county in 300 million people. Let's get 45,000 people together that says, you know what? No more. We're not going to allow you to take our property, where we live, our abodes, and we're not going to allow you to sell bonds against it. Because somebody, I guess, this thing called municipalities or whatever, they came along and magically made this claim that they have an interest in our properties. And then they said, well, you know what, since we have this interest, we're going to sell bonds against it. And, of course, it's all for the betterment. It's all to protect you. It's all for educating the children and yada, 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 sidewalks, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's all bullshit because it all goes to it's all part of what's really, if you boil it all down, it's a capitalist, communist kind of a system.
Yeah, you know what, Bob? Let me stop you there because that's actually something that I want to address with Michael. Okay, because he spent a lot of time in these communist countries and things, and he has friends that have boots on the ground there, and one thing that I want to ask him is if he sees the U.S. kind of going down this path towards the suppression and the poverty and just the misery that is an everyday reality there in the Ukrainian Crimea. Okay.
Hey, Rich.
Because I think that we're heading there, but through the back door. Okay,
Rich, with all due respect,
yes.
I don't even need to ask that man that question. I was born in 1957, and I've sat here and I've watched so many of the liberties that I had while I was growing up. I've watched them slowly, of course, not, they said, Stalin came in and Lenin came in and Mao came in, right. And you know what, here it is, we've got the guns and you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Well, just because they've done it slowly today, I've watched my liberty stripped from me. I've watched, roadside checkpoints of all things. Damn it, man.
I know.
If you don't think this isn't Stasi stuff, then you know what? I don't have to ask him anything about what's going on in other countries. I watch it. I watch it in the jurisdictions that I'm dwelling in.
It's only a question of levels, Bob, as to how bad it is.
Right.
Comparatively. Not whether it's occurring.
Well, then I'll ask him. Hold on a second. Let me dial. I'm going to dial him up here.
You go ahead and dial him up.
Well, it doesn't matter whether, how often it's happening. It's happening. And, history's proven the minute you let that begin to happen, it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
They're doing that stuff up here on snowmobile trails. Or
hold on a second.
In the summertime on the lake.
Hello, this is Michael.
Michael, this is Rich.
Hi, Rich.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you.
Welcome to the show, man. Have you been listening to what we've been chatting about here?
I'm sorry, I just walked in on it, so I'm just now catching up here with the conversation.
Okay, great. Just to let the audience know who you are, you've been a guest twice now, and I wanted just to give you a call and touch base because you just came from a trip a couple months back from, actually you were in the country of Georgia for a very long time, and I know that you have a lot of friends in Ukraine and Crimea there, and I just wanted to get your read on where things are standing now between this standoff here between the Russia and the U.S. and things.
Well, it's interesting because I do have a lot of friends from that area, that part of the world, and I've been in Russia 3 times, Ukraine 13 months. It was during the Orange Revolution, which I was present throughout. I didn't participate. I was actually just strictly a tourist and an expat there, but the former interpreter and personal assistant, my former who later became my wife and then is now my ex-wife, actually was heavily participating in the Orange Revolution and in her free time. And that was something that she did separate from my activity there, which was just strictly as an expat and tourist. But I was there, obviously, at a very interesting time in history. And, yeah, that was, I could tell you a lot of stories about that alone. So there's a lot of different topics I could shoot off into, but I'll try to stay focused on the kind of what the friends are thinking. Let's say that, if you will. Okay. One thing that is problematic with the Russian side, with the Russian people, is that they have an attitude that they have, at least a few of them have expressed to me that Alaska is ours, the king or queen, whatever it was. I think king made a big mistake and gave it up, and we should take it back. And, you can search in Google and put in Alaska, Russians taking back. And, this has kind of been reported on. It's been in a couple of media articles put out by Russia, whether, the question of whether that's true or not. Well, I can tell you that when I landed in Russia, that is something that I heard. I heard that it was on the radio. 90% of the Russian population is outside the major cities such as Moscow or St. Petersburg, where people perhaps are, let's say, a little bit more well-traveled, more maybe perhaps not quite as censored as the other 90% of that rural population, because it's quite censored. Even the internet there is with a kind of a department within the government that censors the internet pretty actively. And I actually had my internet access, believe it or not, blocked in Tbilisi for rents.com by the Russian censorship, that arm of the government. And that was quite shocking. It was obviously a technical error or mistake or a test. I don't know. But in any case, that lasted for, some short period of time, some minutes or some hours maximum. And so I know from that fluke, if you will, that, and also having been in Russia those 3 different times in my life, that censorship is, in fact, not only a kind of a Stalinist throwback, if you will, the oppression of free speech, but also any opposition, of course, is going to run into some severe challenges with that, of course, and it's very problematic to be in opposition in Russia, as I have seen. And so, these things, and the Russian people's attitude of those that buy into that propaganda. Another said to me, who's in Moscow now? She's a friend, and she said, we should take Finland and also. So, this is her response to me, telling her about this bit of what I would, as an American or as any free person or any respecter of international law, anybody that would be within the international norms of ethics and morality of respecting other people's territorial integrity and so on and so forth, would not agree with this mentality of, we should just go take maybe another country's piece of land because there's some historical fantasy behind it. You know what I mean? So that's troubling on the Russian side. And when I was in Tbilisi, there was big problems with our Russian neighbors there, as they would say. The problem was that they were already in occupation of the Republic of Georgia since August 2008. And, of course, there's a few different contrasting perspectives about that whole situation. But the reality is that 20% of Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, is under Russian military troops occupation, and some estimates have been voiced or said to be around an average of 10,000. So here you have a country that's 20% occupied by Russian military forces. And I was down there in the capacity of a journalist and filmed that just back in October.
I saw quite a few of your videos that you posted on your Facebook and stuff.
Yeah, that was quite a historical event, if you will. I think that so far I've posted about this quite widely on Facebook, but as far as I know, to my knowledge, I'm probably, or perhaps am, the only American journalist in history to go and film there in the Republic of Georgia. In fact, I think when I was there in February of this 2014, and the NATO Military Committee was there in a historical first meeting between NATO Commander General Nuds and the Irakli Al-Hassania, Georgia's defense minister. And I was right in the Ministry of Defense and had the great honor and pleasure to film the first a minute or two of this historical first meeting. And it was the first time that the American press was in the building. And it really did show, and it does show, a level of democratic progress and a mutual trust, actually. I mean, we have real allies in the Republic of Georgia, and that would include those that are in government, because how could I have such access? And no one asked me to do that particular event. This is something that I had applied for access to and that I had gained access for. So it really did show a healthy democratic major step in progress for that country, which aspires to become more democratic and more developed, which they in some key ways really have taken steps forward in doing. And so you've got this other side of the fence, literally, here with Russia. And Russia is actually just legislated a short time ago, Putin or Duma, I'm not sure which, but the reality is now that it's a law that if you say certain profanities or there's a list of words in art and film or something like this, or, you know, it's being the idea that if you speak a profanity, you can be fined for it and problems like that. So it really is the opposite situation. You cross a border and you should be very careful what you speak, and especially if you're learning Russian like I have, you know.
Hey, Michael, you say you're American?
Yes, born here in Marshall, Missouri. So this is my home. Where I'm at right now is Missouri, and been traveling though since I was about 34 worldwide, about the last 9 years actually.
No, I got you, but I'm going to throw something out there that you may or may not like, but I mean, if you're buying into the American story where we're better than they are or whatever, that's all great, but the point is, we're in Japan, we're in Germany, we're in Saudi Arabia, we're in Syria, we're in Libya with force, we're in Turkey. I could go on and on and on and list the countries that we have physical presence with military. What makes us any better, any different than Russia doing the same thing?
Well, that's an excellent point.
We're in Philippines. We're all over. We just pretend to be their friends. But the reality is we have a military presence there.
Well, I wouldn't say, I mean, this is where I can understand and agree with some of that. And there's another part, though, that I've actually seen some real results and progress with what our government is doing in terms of developing democracy. Because if we put that in the perspective that at least for the last, say, the predominance of the last 4 years, I have spent in the Republic of Georgia. And I've seen, for example, electricity infrastructure literally photos, news releases, and the reality that the electrical service is better. It used to be there, for example, some years back, you would go by candlelight for about 5 to 6 days at a time. And when my ex-wife and I were there, when we were to get together there married, we married in Tbilisi. She's later U.S. Army Airborne and U.S. Special Forces, Special Operations, and she's from Kiev, Ukraine. Her father was Russian. He developed sonic weapons for the the military years ago in the Navy. So there's quite an interesting set of connections that I have still to Ukraine, not just as somebody that has an ex-wife there, but I've still got friends in Ukraine and also American Ukrainian friends, and we keep in touch pretty closely, actually, and they've got connections within the government there as well as having relatives in the various areas. But I think that to go back to the question of occupation, now here's a situation where do we want to help the Ukrainian people? Should we help the Ukrainian people? And there's a situation where only hopefully the economic sanctions will work. So far, it's questionable as to how much they have been effective. And you've got this U.S. Senator John McCain, who is a very strong supporter and strong friend of the Republic of Georgia and the Georgian people. His call was for weapons. And so here you have this idea of, well, yeah, we've been in Germany, we're in Japan, we're around the world, but yet the world is still a very ugly place. And there are certain interests in this world that would rather see America not exist, that are not in alignment with our values of free speech or the various cultural values or just liberty and freedom and democracy and liberty for all, the basic principles that I think most Americans would strongly say that, yes, this is our tradition, this is our mentality, we're willing to sacrifice for that, and we're the home of the proud and the brave. And there's other dark places in the world that seek to extinguish that flame of liberty, that beacon of democracy, that light in the world, so to speak. I still believe very strongly as a traveler that I don't think it's good that we go and occupy maybe to such an extent. Ron Paul has said a lot of thoughtful things about that topic, and I'm not in complete disagreement. But there's this other side that, I've had a lot of people ask me there, and this is sad to me, that they said, well, can you help us? And you're an American, and somehow they think that, we're still in the position to do that. And so we have to ask ourselves, when you've got people pleading, asking for your help, when they're under such deep economic oppression of even spiritual oppression, if you will, a lot of places are suffering from deep and very severe spiritual oppression. And it's just a nightmare to think that we don't still have the ability, whatever those ways we could argue what the best tools might be to employ them, but that we still wouldn't have the ability to fight for a greater democracy and freedom in the world, and to see less oppression and less real tyranny. And let's face it, we've got some very serious enemies as well. And I think we have to be in the position to deal with that. I'm still not convinced that it's a bad thing that America is still a formidable and a very mighty power in the world and on the international stage today.
Okay, let me get into this before I turn you two guys loose here, because I know you guys are. I know you guys. Oh, you guys. Okay, but anyway, oh my God.
We're an
Michael,
eclectic bunch. Let's put it that way.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm going to keep you two caged just for a few more minutes here. Okay. Michael, we had talked about this some in our last talk that we had before the show, just to touch base some, but I brought the fact that there are actually a lot of Americans, and I see it on our board, I see it on Zero Hedge. There are a lot of Americans that kind of know, that kind of have a better, it's not a better understanding, but kind of how do I put this? That understand what the true motives are of the U.S. and NATO and things, and many of them are actually pro-Putin. I mean, I see a lot, and it's absolutely surprised me that there's so many Americans that kind of that are in the know that actually admire Putin for standing up to this this infringement. I mean, and that's basically how I see it. Of this of the bankers into the Ukraine, and that's always kind of just surprised me some. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you both made some very good points in this, and I appreciate that. The thing about the media reports or the journalists in the West, I won't name them, but they're pretty prominent in the alternative media, let's say, or internet media for sure, and mainstream actually. There's a couple I'm thinking of that are mainstream and heard on both U.S. and Russian media outlets. But I don't think, I think they need to live in these places for a year or two, like I have, and I think that they need to go spend some time in Russia. This is what I think. But that said, there is another side, and I'll explain. When I was in Russia, there are some people that feel, talk, breathe, pray, eat, and love and hate just like we do. And one of the interesting things to me is that when I was with my then fiance there, ex-fiance now, there was this understanding that there were nights they went to bed and they were praying. The majority of, or a large portion of Russia is Orthodox Christian, as is Ukraine and Georgia, and so they prayed in fear about attack from America or being afraid of the USA, and certainly being a formidable power and coming up closer to the borders. NATO would say, well, everyone should have their choice, and I agree with that. They should, as far as their security choices or elsewise within reason, within law and all that. But I think that on the other side, if you put yourself in the Russian position, they would be, from what I heard, they were just as afraid in certain situations of being attacked or being in a war, and they were. Both sides demonize each other. This is something that you'll learn when you travel, is that that's a godless nation, or they're with Satan, or this type of demonization happens a little bit too easily and a little bit too frequently in human affairs, let's say that. So, but in reality, you still have some serious security issues in the region. And I think that this is not what also the world media is keenly aware of. For example, there were things happening in Georgia, the Republic of Georgia. I was down on that border. When I went down there, I considered it a risk to my life. It is considered a war zone or a conflict zone. I was under military sniper targeting when I walked up there, and it was unannounced apparently that I was coming. At least I will assume that on one side for sure. So that's something that I risk my life to go down and check out myself, is what's going on with the Russian-Georgian situation. And the whole country was in uproar days before that, and protests across the nation, because this was, according to the Georgian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, this was an illegal act. It was against the ceasefire agreement that they had. It was also violation of international law. And so both the United States Department and NATO had called upon Russia to respect Georgia's territorial integrity. So you've got this type of information also that suggests that, Putin's not the greatest respecter of not only human rights, but his neighbors' territorial integrity and stuff like that. Now, the other side of it is that, if you go and provoke a bear, you can expect or anticipate a reaction. So, and there's certainly the concern, let's say by a very interesting source that I have there in Georgia, who is American, that there could be false flags there with Abkhazia, for example, or other types of things that some accuse were involved in the situation in August 2008 in the Georgian-Russian War. So if we want peace and stability in the region and the world, I think it's regardless of where we stand or what perspectives we have about the sides involved in these wars or these conflicts, I think it's important to keep in mind that there's a lot at risk there. A lot of people are concerned about World War developing out of this very quickly. I'm not exactly one of those people in the sense that I don't expect that to happen anytime soon, but if there is the real issue that could have very easily happened, according to a War College professor and former U.S. Air Force Colonel retired, had talked on Democracy Now! I can't remember or recall his name at the moment, but it's a video that's on YouTube. And he speaks about the Georgian situation in August 2008 was so serious that it was above Iraq. It was above the situation with Iran because the Russians, according to him, had moved strategic nuclear weapons to the border. They had full intentions, it would appear, to use or to employ them. So that's a very, very, very serious situation that is of international concern, not just a regional concern. Or, a lot of Americans have this idea that, what's going on over there, who cares? Bring our troops back home, or, the other services that we have in the world, the Peace Corps and so on and so forth are doing what John Kennedy talked about is, they're serving America, but they're doing it in a foreign service capacity, and in a world that with nuclear weapons and terrorism and things like that, would it not make sense that America would be involved in at least a strong and an efficient way, a practical way, on the international stage? So this is another way to look at it, I think. At the same time, there's a lot of questions that, in the direction of, are we doing too much and too far away and too many places, that kind of thing. I mean, I can understand that certainly in the economic times that we're in as well.
Right.
But at the same time, we have these security issues in the world today that have to be, I think, just my opinion as an international traveler, do have to be addressed, unfortunately, and have very serious.
Right. Well, that's why I respect your observations, because you have been on the trains, going from Kiev to, to these small towns, and you've seen, you've seen the part of the Ukraine and Crimea that we don't see on the news, and how these people's daily lives truly are, and but I feel bad because it's almost as if they're jumping from the fire. I mean, from the frying pan into the fire. I mean, they don't have a choice between two evils. I mean, they're kind of just stuck in between, and the only two choices that they have are not choices that are truly going to benefit them as a people. Because there's lies. I mean, because there's lies on both sides. Each side is one big lie. And these people are going to send their kids into war, for nothing, for just a big lie, and that's a crime. Bob, how about you, man?
Yeah, the question I have concerns the political organization of the universal empire, or former universal empire, called Russia. Is Russia, in their political organization, are they operating under emergency and war powers? Where in it, in their political organization, where and how are they allowed to, supposedly by the consent of peoples there, because it is, I guess, the Republic of Russia, where and how do they gain this power, the political organization, where it is operated by Putin and these other factions. How is that organized?
I don't know a lot about that. I have read articles and seen some documentaries on YouTube. For example, the Putinery, which is Putinery. I think it was one of our American media documentaries, or some high officials that were quoted in that. And it basically documents the power structures and how Putin himself came to power. And so I'm familiar with it from that point of view. There was a journalist that was kicked out of Moscow, and I think his name was Luke. I don't have that name in front of me, but he was actually returned. He had to go back to Britain, and he, I think, was working with a major outlet like The Guardian or the BBC or something like that. And he had accused Moscow or Russia rather, of being a mafia state, and because of that, they basically told him he was no longer, for him, Russia was closed. So you have this, this type of ideology from these sources of information that suggests that it's a kind of a virtual mafia state or something like this, and but as far as what's really happening, it seems to me that we've worked closely sometimes with Russia in terms of security issues or whatever. Certainly they had a successful Winter Olympics as far as what the public largely knows anyway. Certainly there weren't any big problems there that we're aware of, and so they have had some successful working together even in the security issues and things like that. And they're still business partners. So it's not all black and white. It's not all very clear. I think that's the thing, is that there is a lot of deception involved, and that's the difficult part in trying to tease out what the actual real mechanisms of power are and how that really works. And I think, honestly, the governments are looking at, I know over in Georgia, they're wanting to study how, like what we're doing right now, how this works, how to study and research the media. There is a form.
The thing I'm getting at is that in the United States, we have the Lieber Code from 1864, Lieber Code number 100, which remains in full force and effect today. And if we go by the Senate Report 93-549, the United States remains operating under war and emergency powers. And therefore there really is no democratic process here, based upon the current regime of organization. And what I'm asking is the same scheme, the same form, operating to our supposed frenemy, I guess you would call it, friend enemy.
I like that, Bob. I like that. Is that the same political scheme that is in operation there?
Well, that's a good question. If you were to look at the situation with how the opposition is suppressed and in the way that it's suppressed, it would be difficult to determine if it's an emergency war power or martial law type of executive order or just a real throwback to Stalinist times. One of the things about Putin is that he was born in Tbilisi, where I have spent almost 5 years, in the capital city, the international city there in the Republic of Georgia. So this is Putin, it said, had admired Stalin, and so we have just basically a lot of the same characteristics in some sense. But at the same time, I think that while this way of operating can look like emergency law or martial law powers or special law code or whatever, because they are a nation that's if they're not at war, it would certainly be that they are prepared to be. And the thing is that the media is another thing they're struggling with, because you've got these guys running around with cell phones and cameras, and press is more free, I think, these days because of the tool that the internet is. But I think at the same time, there's people in that part of the world that are really actively looking how to control it, how to continue to try to suppress it. Putin himself is after the internet, but yet you had a former prime minister in the Republic of Georgia who openly stated that the media is the fourth government, and that would be the former Georgian prime minister Ivanishvili, Bidzina Ivanishvili, and he's one of the wealthiest men in the world. I think he's in the top 223, or he was on the Forbes list, and so he's the former prime minister, and this is a statement that he made, and that's a very interesting statement because they perceive it as that, and I don't know if we've ever said something to that extent here in the United States, but that's their present point of view, is that the media itself is the fourth government. And when you've got these kind of more oppressive powers that you're dealing with in some other countries, you have this attempt to control the internet, to engage in heavier censorship and other methods of stifling dissent or opposition. And but they're trying to reach over into total control, world control, and implement that through the United Nations and things like that. These are things that Putin has allegedly, according to different media reports, been involved in one way or another, trying to bring about this. So they're very much it's very anti-free speech, and you don't feel to freely express yourself when you cross over into Russia. You just don't. Well, if it has to do with certain topics, you are very careful what you will say.
Well, and you know what? At the NSA in the United States, oh yeah, you can say it. Oh yeah, you're free to say it, but they'll ruin your life if you do. So I see very little difference there.
Okay, let me pose this question to you guys. I mean, have we already been engaged in World War III for the last I don't know, year or so? But it's all just been it's a different war, and we are truly at war, but we just haven't fired the nukes yet as the final finale.
Well, I found it interesting that some of the war games have coincided, and I'm speaking about Russian war games, have coincided with major hacking attacks on U.S. banking and computer and other, internet or computer infrastructure. I think that's been that's been very unfortunate. I think I mentioned to you earlier before the show that when we were discussing a few things, that the one acquaintance told me that the internet was something like 66% slowed down in April, and I think there were 5 Chinese military officers charged with hacking by the United States, and the internet was, with these 5 major companies, such as AOL, Gmail, etc., that there was like a 66% slowdown in speed. So, I mean, certainly these things have happened before, unfortunately, but April was that month where we had economic sanctions being spoken about in the media between, Russia and Western powers and so on, and so you had this kind of tit for tat, and I think that it just feels to me, or seems to me, and the numbers do seem to indicate it here in June, some of the numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but and then food prices and things like that. Now there can be other factors involved. I gotta give it that. But right. It's costly. I'll say that. I mean, it does seem that this World War III, a Cold War, if you will, this type of tit for tat, back and forth, this kind of secret ill will has been going on for some time. But then on the other hand, there have been some areas where we've had some cooperation too, and some. I really think that that was supposed to be what the spirit of the Olympics is all about. It's unfortunate to see that some it would almost seem to be beyond coincidence that the last couple of Olympic Games have ended, or began rather, with war in that part of the world, and I think that's really tragic. I think that's unfortunate.
I look around the world and see how many conflicts we are involved in, and we have active military, running defenses, and they're engaged in battle. They're engaged in battle in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're sending drones into Pakistan. We're involved in Syria. I mean, there's armed conflict going on all around the world, and it appears to me that we are in the midst of a world war, but it's a clandestine war, and that it's being fought, and the only thing that's left is who's going to win this thing, and it's going to come down eventually to the exchange of nukes.
Well, I find it interesting that this economic sanctions approach is being employed in this way, but I'm not sure, because I did actually very strongly feel that U.S. Senator John McCain's call for weapons to be supplied to Kiev, I was actually in favor of that. But at the same time, as far as oversight of the way that we're spending money in wars, how it's working with defense contractors, are they misusing the money? These are calls that for more oversight as far as Pentagon spending, things like that, a senator, a Missouri, U.S. Senator Clara McCaskill, I've watched her videos up on YouTube on her channel, and she's actually made some calls to that effect, that those areas of oversight, be looked at more closely, and she's actually made that call. So I think it's something that is not just on the people's minds, but actually the government is, according to what I've seen in her address about that they're actually looking at trying to reorganize that, if you will. But yet we have had to, it appears, to go into Europe with at least, what was it, $1 billion or something like that, just in spending that the U.S. President Obama announced, and then troops over there and things like that. I mean, it is that we've still got to maintain strength. That's the language of strength that, unfortunately, if the economic sanctions don't work with Russia, we're dealing with some people in certain positions of power, it is said, that are above and beyond or equal to certain presidents, let's say, that don't care about money. And so this is the concern, is like, well, where is, as he said earlier, where is the power structure? Like, how does that really work? What's really happening with how the mechanism is moving forward? And you would hope that would be based on some law, whether that's, emergency law or martial law or just the norms of law. But in some cases where you have these unusual things, where you have these violations of international law, then it puts everybody in a state of stress. It's a form of, it's the whole country of Georgia was terrorized, when they're moving this fence in this, what they allege to be a creeping occupation there, what was moving the fence in, and for what? Just on the dates of elections, for example. So this is like a form of really scaring the hell out of people, if you will. Yeah. And that's just not. That's where that's a big problem.
It's a game. Okay, Bob. I'm going to let you have the last one on this one. Then we'll move to the cosmic side of it.
I have no comment.
None?
None.
Okay. That's surprising, but okay, cool. Let's Michael, let's move to your other area of expertise here, man.
Sure.
I don't know about you, but I know that Bob and I've talked to my kid and people that come up to the shop and stuff, and everybody's feeling a little bit out of sync, man. Everybody's kind of out of sorts. Some. Is there anything in in the cosmic alignments here that can account for that thing, man?
Well, as far as the astrology,
yes.
What I see right now, there is a Saturn trine the Sun, and that's kind of gives us more somber, serious, kind of more disciplined, kind of. Sometimes it can involve depressive energy into things, and so that's something that we see in the sky now, and that's going to be with us for a little bit there, and that's when that type of energy is around. It's not it's not the most pleasant energy. Let's say that it's not the energy that we want to see. But that is probably one astrological factor that we could consider for that. But on the other hand, we've got some great days coming up here. January 20th through the 27th, the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd and 24th in particular is a bilevel aspect of Jupiter to the Sun. And when we say that in the Magi astrology, that means it's twice as strong. So it's a really fantastic energy in general that will be in the mix of things, let's say, coming up here and just starting on the 20th of this month. So that'll be a really kind of a nice thing to look forward to, and a change up from this Saturn-Sun energy. And there's a Pluto conjunct Earth right now, so there can be some, wanting to kind of transform things, think about things more deeply, kind of a more, it can be some power issues, and that's not good as far as what's happening on the world scene, of course. But then again, it can be expressed positively. It's not a conflict. It doesn't have to be a conflict thing per se. But the idea is that the energy you're talking about right now, it's very possible that can be seen in the Saturn trine the Sun that we're experiencing now.
Bob?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very interesting.
And you still with us?
Bob? He may with his phone. But anyway, Bob and I have been exploring a lot over the last months about how energy affects us as far as because basically we're all frequency. Everything's based upon vibration, sound. I mean that's kind of like what actually makes up our whole world here. And this and the area of astrology has always kind of fascinated me some because it would seem that that these planets set up different harmonics. Okay, once when they move through, how they align to different masses. I've seen videos where they'll put sand like on this block, and they will move through the different tones and frequencies, and as they move through them, that the sand will gather up in these amazing geometric forms. Okay, so it would seem to me that these these bodies and these planets as they move around create different frequencies, different harmonics that affect us.
Well, there's some.
Okay, Michael, please.
On that note, there's some physical effects are noted. And again, I haven't seen this with my own this particular thing with my own eyes, but I think it's Paracelsus. I'm not sure if that's how you say his name, but he was a great physician, but also a magician, and therefore more or less an alchemist. And it's cited in some of the older texts. Those guys that were doing mixtures back then, to make medicines or to just work with pharmacy or alchemy, if you will, in the older times, the medieval times in particular, and the Renaissance times, they had noted some particular planetary hours that certain salts or things like this would seem to have such an effect by the position of the planet in question, let's say like Venus, for example, that there would actually be a physical effect to where an operation could be done to make that certain mixture or to see it, mix in a certain way that otherwise under another influence could not be performed. And I wish I could find that source and find out if there's literature, for example, to find out if that's been scientifically confirmed or not. I think the gist of one article that I had read is that they'd actually had confirmed that sort of thing. But that would be something that would be on the physical side. On the not physical side, life, let's say, just pure life, relationships, things like that. I have the foundation of that idea that the stars, when they're in a certain position in our lives and align in a certain way, that certain events or certain signs and certain types of energies or certain that fall into certain categorizations actually do manifest, and because of that, can get a very high accuracy of prediction in matters of love or money, and in particular big life events in particular, and that's due to the research from the Magi Society, the MAC study, on over 100,000 people for a span of 20 years, and the discovery by Magi Astrology, by the Magi Society, of the great importance of the astral body. It's actually an asteroid, we call it an astral body in Magi Astrology. That great importance of that particular astral body in specific areas of love or money in someone's life, and by a couple of techniques of using that Magi Astrology and the knowledge from the Magi Society, I'm able to pretty quickly determine, just give it the 77% rule, that I can go back into history and determine with pretty good accuracy the periods in a person's life, or the years or the months in a person's life where they were likely to have experienced or found true love. And a lot of times that's when those people got married. Not always. Sometimes true love, even with the best of things going on, it doesn't always work out. And there's many of us that have been through that experience, unfortunately. But so there is the heartbreak side of astrology, and it's Saturn's involvement with Chiron. And when these things happen, how we can try to minimize the effects and make strategy. But to go back to the simplistic statement that because of that apparent effect from the stars or the planet's influence in our lives, and if we want to explain that as harmonics, if you want to maybe look at the perspective of, well, it's a sign, the more metaphysical, more spiritual or prophetic, or even maybe biblical. There's a couple of references from the Bible about the stars being set as signs for things.
Absolutely.
Destiny, we get into fate versus destiny, especially if you look at fixed stars astrology, the astrology that in particular Bernadette Brady is really working with wonderfully, and she's got some great software for that too, the fixed stars astrology. But those are particular, the actual stars, which a lot of astrologers don't deal with. The actual stars have a quite profound apparent effect in certain key areas of our personality or our lives, and those can be noted in the fixed stars chart, and some of the interpretations that go with that. So it's really profound, because I have seen it as someone who's got the software, who looks at the charts, who did exercises to work with intuition, developing that, all these different things, the metaphysics overall, for some number of years now, and working with people. That's the key, is not just only family and friends, but people from around the world who have said, that's when this happened, and yeah, that's right, or no, that isn't right. And that's how I really learn more than just picking up some book or looking at some software or just participating in a teleconference or something like that. It's the idea that you see it, and when you see it happening in people's lives, when they confirm that to you, then that's the magic. It's just almost like, wow. And what does it mean? Does it mean the stars are operating with harmonics or some other types of energies? Is it more metaphysical in terms of it's a sign? How much is fate versus destiny in terms of what the fixed stars are doing in our lives or in our charts or in the map of our soul? I mean, how does this work? But in that it does, this I've seen too many times in specific ways to dismiss it as, definitely, like not worthy of study or a hoax or something like that,
right.
Or false altogether.
Bob, are you there, man? Bob. Michael, we may have lost Bob.
Yeah, I'm not hearing him on my end here, so I assume that he's... What I've thought about lately
what?
Is you can look at the chart, and if you go, because I've got 11 documented public predictions at my HTTP //universalstar.gs. That website's got documentation of 11 different published beforehand, public documented predictive or predictively accurate or predictively accurate astrological analysis before the events took place. I published about those things. So when I was really contemplating this is that, for some period of time, as someone who studied magic, practiced magic in the Western tradition, for a couple of years, every single day I did these exercises. And the tarot that's typically out there, this is just one example. I thought, I had found the original source in a book called The Secret in the Bible by Tony Bushby. And it was such a profoundly important book to me that I actually bought it, and later I would sell it myself through my eBay bookstore, and I've shipped them around the world, and I sell them through Amazon as well. So, but the key is that I thought that tarot is the original tarot, the glyphs, if you will, from actually the temple walls in Egypt, in the Temple of Luxor and so on, where the same initiates to the mystery schools would walk through and be initiated into the meaning of each card, so to speak. Each of the 22 major arcana was 11 sides of the wall, the hall that you would walk through and see the mural on the wall. And then there's another place in the temple, another temple there that they can be seen and deciphered, if you will, in the Egyptian hieroglyphics of dancers on the wall, for example, are the 22 major arcana of the tarot. And so I won't go into all the details behind that, but what I've come to conclude is I thought for some years, I thought, those are the original tarot. If you want to be able to work it, you need those. But yet you had people that used the more recent tarot, very different decks, artistic designs, and they're still telling accurate things about, someone's future or making accurate predictions. So what I've come to conclude, especially today when I talked to my aunt yet another time about a family member, which is would been my paternal grandmother's mother. Could the Cherokee, she was part Cherokee and part French, and it was her mother who was Cherokee, and so she could take and tell the future just by looking at the coffee grounds. And we discussed that today, and we're like, I asked, how do you think she did that? And, my cousin was there, my aunt was there, and they said, it could be because this is the culture. It's Native American to be able to have seers and the medicine men, and that's probably how she just really picked it up, because it could have came from the French side, but certainly they're not without their history, important contributions to occult knowledge and metaphysics too. But more likely they thought that it had come from the Native American spirituality, that she had this natural ability, this gift to be able to just look into the coffee grounds and know that family was coming, back in a day and a time where it was very unusual to even be able to afford to make a long-distance phone call. we're talking many years ago here in the United States. But the idea that I come to conclude is that, if you can have the ability to look at an astrology chart, to look at the tarot cards, to look at a coffee ground or a magic mirror, if you will, you're just basically, the difference is you're, with astrology, the intuitive, the predictive ability you're getting because you're basically looking almost at a calendar in a sense. Also, you're looking at a map in time. You're either going back or into the present, or you're going forward, and you can map it out like that, whereas some of these other tools of divination, if you will, or kind of tools of reflecting upon your own intuition, if you will, to draw out something from your own psyche, your own intuitive nature, knowing about the future or the present or some situation even in the past. I think that it's not always so much important what that tool is. Certainly each one has its own different mechanisms or pluses and minuses. But it kind of ties in earlier with this whole, there's a lot of yet unknowns in this whole metaphysical realm of, how far can astrology be taken as a science? I think that it certainly can be taken further, and they try to come up with new research and information. But, sometimes it's a chore to tease out what's disinformation or what's simply not correct versus, what's helpful, practical, useful information.
Right.
In terms of those metaphysical arts, if you will.
Bob, are you back yet, man?
I think so. Am I?
Yeah. We've been trying to reach you for a while now, man.
Well, no, I've been, whatever reason we were cut off, I was listening to the entire conversation.
Huh.
I'm glad to have you back, Bob.
Well, you know what? I am too. But, Bob and I have actually been kind of in this mode over the last few months, and you kind of touched on it here, and that's to truly observe what's going on around us and trying to interpret it. Okay, what you're saying is that this, woman could look into some tea leaves and interpret, what she's seeing, as it's going to, eventually play out. And Bob and I have actually, as a exercise, been watching more closely to everything that's going on around us, to try and interpret, what is really going on. I mean, so I know that's kind of hard to explain. Maybe Bob can explain what he's found out.
Well, basically, I've never been a person who believes in prophecy. However, I am beginning to believe that a person can see events that have already occurred before they've happened. And it certainly appears the events have occurred on another plane or dimension prior to us acting them out. And it certainly appears that precognition, reading tea leaves, et cetera, kind of, I don't know if it interrupts it, but it gives you a look prior to the actors in this dimension acting it out, is kind of what I'm coming to. In other words, our free will is taking place, just not in this particular time and space. That that we're being animated to a certain degree based upon events that have occurred somewhere else. What are your thoughts on that?
I've kind of taken the position that I think some events seem to be fated, which is kind of what I think I've understood you to point out. Yet I think, and I would like to hope, that we can change certain things. I think the real question that comes to my mind is that, how much of that can we change? What future points in destiny can be changed and what can't. And I do study the Billy Edward Albert Meyer case out of Switzerland, and I try to keep up with that, and there's certainly a lot more for me to learn about that. But I've read through some of that material and some of the things that are presented on the topics about how much is destiny versus fate and that kind of thing, and what we can change and what are the consequences, and trying to even make certain changes with the future. I read that, or have read that, and then I look at my own experiences using astrology and trying to say, well, here's what we see coming up here. Here's what you can do to avoid what I feel could be some issue or some problem come up. And, and I've seen some people make some changes and manage that better. Whereas if the same events would have happened without that insight for them, then it would have been more stressful, or they would have been caught off guard, that kind of thing like that. So I've wondered, it's fascinating to think how much can we really progress and change the future for the better. And that's kind of a game that I'm in, so to speak. When I work with some people in terms of consulting with them about astrology, if we can look ahead and say, here's what the stars are indicating, or here's one way to interpret what's going down then, and here's some ideas or some suggestions on how you might want to better manage that, or get through that, or change that, or take advantage of that, or whatever the situation might be. It's kind of a game that I play quite frequently, and so that's kind of like my perspective. And whether we can say the game is real or not, it certainly seems to have had its advantages in terms of trying to make some of those changes, trying to stave off some of the more what we perceive as problematic periods sometimes in astrology, or to implant, so to speak, natalize is the proper term in astrology, the energy from the stars or the planets into, whatever it is that we're trying to get more luck or whatever into, so to speak.
Well, I dwell in a very rural area, and many times, I might not go out in the public for 10, 14 days at a time. And so I'm surrounded by nothing but nature. And a lot of times the only person that I interact with in person is with my wife. And that opens a lot of insights when you're out in such an environment. And it certainly seems to me that when I allow everything to just kind of fade away, where I'm not in society, where I'm not being influenced. Of course, I'm being influenced by all kinds of things. If I go on the internet, I'm being influenced. If I turn on the TV, I'm being influenced. If I'm around my wife, I'm being influenced. Anyone I come into contact with, I'm being influenced. One of the things that I've really learned about this experience is that when I'm out of contact, I gain a greater, what would I call that? Not initiation or initiatory, but a greater awareness of things around me and what other people are attempting to do, what these other forces are attempting to place upon me. Forces which I cannot see, smell, see, etc. And I find myself where I'm completely reliant upon my intuition more and more. And it appears that whatever is taking place in the background is trying to influence me not to use my my intuitions. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that's fantastic, and I think it's a really important point. I actually have a link to the Introduction to the Spiritual Teachings, which I study on my website, universalstar.gs. And the thing is that in there's a few lines of 269, and I consider it the foundation on which I try to base or try to build my personal spiritual path on. But the idea of spending time in nature is actually a key foundational teaching to these spiritual teachings that I study. So the idea of getting out and getting, even for the health benefits, I've actually read also that spending time in a good forest, for example, with the pure fresh air, the trees, very nice forest can improve your health in so many different ways. And so it's really, I get also I think most of men and women do. I think most of us, humanity, gets a certain sort of inspiration, a certain connection with the creative, with the creational when they are under the night sky, when they are atop a mountain, or when they're at the lake, or just reflecting upon a pond. I think that there's a lot that we can benefit from staying in connection, spending some time daily if it's possible. Of course, everyone doesn't have that possibility, but to spend that time in nature is very important for our spiritual nourishment. And it's really I think it's very beautiful the way that you described that, because that's actually a very key point of the spiritual teachings. I myself draw great inspiration from just spending time, whether it's in the night sky or whether it's looking up at the moon or just spending time at the lake or in the mountains and so on. I think it's a very key important point, especially for our health these days. I think the distractive factor you mentioned, I think the more that we get, sometimes we can get caught up with internet, television, media, the crowd, the mob mentality, so to speak, the mass mentality, that kind of thing. And so I think to detach from that, certainly one good way is to go out alone or with a loved one or loved ones into nature, or friends or family or whatever, and spend some time detached from the kind of those distractions that you mentioned.
Well, personally, I'm not personally anymore. I'm not a person who I believe nothing. I think everything around us is illusion. And it's an illusion on steroids that's being torn apart, torn asunder, if you want to call it that. And therefore, I think in situations like that, one must rely on intuition and give up the programming. And there's only one way to do that, which is to get back into nature in order to let the mind, let your mind, not your brain, not your body, but let your mind go to rest. Let your mind tell you what you need to do. And it certainly appears to me that there are powers that are out there, unseen, invisible, etc., that are certainly attempting to influence your mind. And the best, because you can't exercise your free will if those powers are influencing you, whether they be stars or, cosmic or astrotheological forces, etc. I think we've lost our ability to really tune in to our own intuition, or maybe that's what the powers that be are attempting to do, which is to erase our intuition. I'm not sure, but I go along a lot with the Gnostic premise of the demiurgos and archons and et cetera, although that is nothing more than an explanation for physics, I think.
That's interesting. There's a lot of potential there, I think, with that, and to see just how far we can push things. You know, I follow the Psychic Twins, Terry and Linda Jameson, on the Facebook, and get their newsletter and things like that. And I had a reading with them back in 2010 in July, and I think they've set some records lately as far as predictive ability and things like that. But they're basically teaching people to be more intuitive, you know, to take their own power back. Very similar in a sense to what you're pointing out in the idea that they're censored. They've had some major. They've actually said that they've been hacked. They have been.
Really?
Yeah, they actually, that wasn't. I think that was very recent. I think that was just within the last month or two. They had actually.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that really backs up what Bob just said about the powers that be, or some serious attempts out there to, you know, I mean, what's the purpose in censoring, you know, for example, a prediction about a hurricane that they made, and then a major network censors that, the fact that they actually did it? You would think that would actually, you know, bring more attention to their show and so on and so forth. So there's just real interference out there.
It is, and it goes, you know, back to, you know, the Indian woman being able to read the tea leaves. Is that you know, there's a lot more powerful and important forces that are at play that are invisible. Okay, and you know, we're locked into this physical realm, and the powers to be want us locked into this physical realm. That's the whole game, is to keep us locked into the lie. You know, once you get down to the subatomic level of things, you know, reality disappears. This world vanishes. We're sandwiched in between the present and the past, and we actually exist in a fleeting moment. But they want us locked into this side and not and not exploring, you know, what is the real truth of why we're here, and, you know, what our true capabilities are, what the, you know, capabilities of our mind. You know, that's the whole game, man. That's the whole game.
Yeah, it's about control, and that's something that I see in other countries, but still are, you know, 50 to 100 years behind us, at least, if they're even can be given that much credit. Because, you know, there's people that live in countries where they're afraid to speak, where their religion is, you know, it's the left-right. Well, are you this or are you that? And it's two brands of Christianity, for example, as if though, you know, Americans or others couldn't have another choice in religion or spiritual practice. You know, it's just that, and I hear about, for example, you live in America and the police don't ask you for money, and I'm like, you know, this has never happened to me in my entire life, really. And then to most of my friends, I don't know anybody in the United States who's been pulled over or stopped by police and asked for money. But for
we just do it in the courts. The courts are the ones that get the money, not the cops.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
But they explained that to my Russian friend, right? And she's just laughing at me. She goes, "Oh, you're funny." She goes, "How can that be? You're kidding. That can't exist." No, no, you're lying to me. This was her response. So, you know, we live in a world where even in Ukraine, when I was in Ukraine, in fact, this is on the U.S. Embassy website in Kiev, Ukraine, U.S. State Department, the travel advisory under safety and security there, that area of warning from the U.S. government about travel to Kiev, Ukraine, or Ukraine in general, is that there have, they say, been Americans that have been there and been robbed by those dressed in as police officers there. they've been shaken down. They've been robbed. So I mean, they've had those reports. So that's not a world that you and I, that we as Americans live in.
Right.
We don't live that way. But unfortunately, there's an entire nation of people, even my Russian friend had laughed at this idea that a world like we have here in the United States of America, where you're not extorted by police on the street, for example, that even exists. I mean, and that's the part of the mind that they just don't even have the understanding that it exists.
Well, is it better to be extorted on the road by the police when you flip them 20 or 50 and you're done with it, or is it better to turn around and get hauled into a kangaroo court and have lawyers where you've got to pay lawyers, $500, $3,000, $10,000 to turn around and justify the extortion? Just because here in the United States we cut out the extortion of the police, and then we get extorted by a higher institution. I mean, it's still the same thing. I would almost think I'd rather put the cop $50 and ride on down the road.
Well, unfortunately, in Russia,
have to go through rather than go through all the court crap that you got here and lawyers and all that. That's an interesting other perspective, but I will say that on the flip side of it, it doesn't certainly stop at the street level. It unfortunately is said to go very high there. So, and again, if you watch the documentary film "The Putin System" or Putinery on YouTube, is the channel I think that has that, then you can see just how all that is said to work in that way. So it's not, I mean, I've been in both places. I've been in Russia for 3 months at one time, another time for a month and a half, and then before that I was there in 2005 for a week. And I just think that based on what I experienced and sharing and talking with other people, that I just think that we're, as I said before, I think we're at least 150 years ahead of things, and I don't think we've ever been in that place. I don't think we've been in the place that they're at, and it's just not, it's not the way to live. There's a better way, and I think we've experienced that. I think we have that now, even though it's not perfect, even though there are certainly problems, and there are certainly, the kinds of issues that we can work on and hopefully improve. But at the same time, I've been in both, and I would say that it's terrible on the other side to see people they're terrible on both sides. Period. And the thing is that what myself I've personally done, I'm somewhat of a low profile kind of person. Try to be low profile, where I don't get myself involved into any kind of extortion. And what I've really found is that the best way to really go about things, and where I'm going in my life is pretty much kind of what you were speaking of, which is to get back into a natural setting.
Exactly. Right.
Looking at, I'm divesting myself of most of my property other than what I actually have to have. I'm trying to live small, keep a very small footprint, and it's going to even get smaller. And get into the spiritual side of this thing, because that seems to be the only part that could possibly even be real. Because most of this, and all this power control, extortion, money, gold,
consumption,
rules, regulations, laws, etc., it's all illusion.
It's static, man. It's all noise. It's absolutely all noise to keep us rooted in the material side, and that's why I don't have that much of a problem kicking stuff to the curb, because as far as the material side of things, I'm pretty well cutting that thing loose. I mean, because that's the lie, and the only truth, is really on the invisible side, the things that you can't see, because that's what's going to continue on past this material part of it, and to think for 1 second, I mean, because you can't see gravity, and you can't see the electromagnetic forces. I pulled 2 magnets out of some speakers that I tore apart at the shop, and trying to get those and trying to force those things together, I couldn't do it because the invisible force there, I mean, I couldn't see it, but it's just as real as the magnets that I was holding in my hand. And it's the same forces that the woman that was able to read the tea leaves, was able to tap into. I mean, those tea leaves didn't spell out, hey, there's somebody coming next week, but she's been around enough to know the connections. Okay, they're not things that you can see, but there are laws and there's rules in place that govern. I mean, actually, this material side of things is actually governed by forces that we can't see. Gravity, electromagnetism, all this other stuff, frequency. I mean, you can't see this stuff, but it governs us. It's what makes this thing. So, but they want us rooted in what we see and not the invisible.
Who are they?
Well, that's the big question there, my friend. I personally think it's the ones that were actually talked about in some of the most ancient texts. It's the fallen ones, the ones that absolutely despise us. They hate us. They take pleasure in suffering. I mean, there is no excuse for any hunger on this planet. There's no excuse for war. There's no excuse for us to sit there and drone and blow up kids and maim and torture. There's no reason for it. I mean, it all comes down to being programmed with this hate and it has to come from a source that hates us, that absolutely hates human, that wants us destroyed, and they can't. I think there's some cosmic law that prevents them from doing it themselves, but they are allowed to influence us where we do it to ourselves. That's my read.
My read is that we're being animated.
What's that?
Okay. Michael, what do you say about that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, what is your opinion on that?
On my little game.
I think that one thing that came to mind while he was explaining that is that there is I'm just using the example of Ukraine and Iraq right now. These are a couple of places that are really going through some of those kind of things that he's talking about, is kind of the darker forces activating, so to speak. But from an astrological point of view, I'll just bring out that both Iraq and Ukraine, in terms of the current Magi astro charts of those countries, they were born, from our perspective, from a Magi astrology point of view, in terms of my interpretation, in my opinion, they were born as evident in the chart with a Saturn quincunx Sun energy. This is a very self-destructive, bad judgment, just pure bad luck energy. And I just note that those two particular nations have, you've got Ukraine with its Chernobyl incident in its past. Fortunately, things I think will look better for Ukraine between 2015 all the way into this time next year, in 2015 all the way into October of 2018, because of a Jupiter conjunct Earth in its heliocentric sky as a progression that it'll see. But being born with this type of energy, it's the same type of energy you see in Iraq. And what do we see in both countries right now? You see a lot of deaths from conflict, from war, from political crisis, other crises, if you will. But some of these darker forces that Rich was just alluding to, you could look at that in terms of, how much is being propaganda from irresponsible media, or just simple, that media that has no respect for the kind of ideals of, truth and what's more peace and truth oriented, and so on. So it's just, it can manifest on different levels. I think you've got the spiritual realm, and then you've got the energetic realm, and then you've got the actual physical realm where it's manifesting. And how much of that is connected, and how much of that could be changed at a higher level, I think that's kind of what he's pointing out, and I think that's an important consideration.
Robert, you have the last question and stuff, and then we'll wrap this thing down. We're getting down to about 3 minutes here.
Well, when we really look at what's called the big toe, or the theory of everything, physicists, they turn around and, mathematically, using double slit experiment, what they're basically saying is that everything is a wave of energy, which is full of nothing but possibilities until it's observed. And that at the bottom of the energy wave is information. I think the real question comes to, where is that information coming from to create these waves of possibility? And who or what is influencing those waves of possibility that influence our observation? And that seems to me to be the major question. And it certainly it's beginning to appear to me anyway that it is us who are involved in that, and hence we have the capability to change everything.
Absolutely.
And it's just that we don't believe that we can. That's what I do, and we have gravitational pulls from the stars, and we have gravitational waves and different energies from around the cosmos, but ultimately it's up to us to break out of our bondage in order to actually change things. Hard to do, but can be done.
Michael, you have last word, my friend.
Well, it's very interesting. It's been a great show, and thank you for having me on. I really appreciate both of you have the depth of insight that just makes it enjoyable to talk with and spend time with. I appreciate that. One thing that came to mind as he was just talking is that there is a quote from a movie that I had just seen, The Fault in Our Stars, and I'm not sure if I can quote that exactly, but basically it's the idea that the fault is not often in our stars, it's within us. And so it's even with the stars' influence and these other influences, be they spiritual or media or the other distractions and so on, it comes back to, I think that we have a lot more control and empowerment over our thoughts once we come to this type of awareness and work more at that. It's certainly not always easy, and it's something that almost everyone, of course, can improve and get better at. And I think that the idea of spending more time in nature and really evaluating that inner reflective mirror in hermetics, the first work, so to speak, is to kind of get the inner reflection. And it goes back to the spiritual teachings, too, where you're trying to look at your inner self. And you can do that a lot more effectively when you spend a little time in nature, exactly. Because it's not only physically healthy for us, but it gives us that chance to reflect as well. Absolutely. And to be less distracted, to get away from distractions.
Michael, great guest, man, and thank you for joining us, man. And we will have you on again. Bob, we still have a lot to talk about, the whole golf club deal, man. Okay?
Bye, man.
Next show, man.
Thanks. Michael, thanks.
Next show.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure.
The theory about everything.
Beautiful. It's all too beautiful. It's all too beautiful. It's all too beautiful. I feel inclined to blow my mind, get up, beat the ducks with a bun. They all come out to groove about, be nice and have fun in the sun.